There we are. Hello, hello. How are you? Welcome to this conversation. This is an episode of The Unconditioned Life with me, Linda Downey. Tonight, I want to talk about hardwired for stress. Are you hardwired for stress? So, if you're listening live, please say hello. I would love to say hello back. I would love to answer any questions or comments that you have. This is streaming in multiple places, both live on social media and as a podcast. So I will check all of the places to see if I miss anything during the broadcast. But please say hello. Let me know where you're from. If you watch the replay later, same thing. And tonight, as I said, we're going to talk about, are you hardwired to be stressed out, to feel overwhelmed, to have anxiety? Are you even hardwired for depression? So a lot of my clients, when we start working together, really feel like they are hardwired because it's been that way for so long, or their whole life, or certainly since they were very young. They remember being in high school. I have women in their 60s who can remember grammar school and feeling anxiety. So that feels like, hi, Pennsylvania. Hi, thanks for saying hello. So that can feel like this must just be how I am. I'm hardwired this way. Maybe you have a parent who was that way and you feel like, okay, well, I picked up behavior. And some of that is true. We do pick up behaviors, we do pick up emotions, but truly to be hardwired. So here's the answer to this. Yes, we are hardwired a bit. And no, we're not hardwired because God didn't make us that way. That's not the design of the model called human being. So let me explain that more fully. So the yes part is when things happen to us, and it's critical to understand this happens very, very, very young. It can happen even before we have language. So even a child as a 1-year-old, even younger than 1, 2, 3, certainly it can happen at 5, 7, 8, but those very, very early years, a lot of adults think, well, the child doesn't have language yet. They're probably not really understanding what's going on. But they do understand to enough of a degree to have a very significant impact. So what do I mean by that? What does that look like? Well, if you're a 10-month-old and you are counting on your attachment to your caregivers, right? You have your parents, you have your caregivers, and now Saturday night, date night, right? So you're now handed over to a babysitter as a 10-month-old. That 10-month-old will see that situation. They don't have language yet, but they do have a way of interpreting the world. The data that's coming into them will be interpreted through their newly developing brain. And that brain will say, oh, these people that I'm attached to, that I'm counting on for my safety and survival, just handed me over to someone else. And for a lot of people, that experience could imprint onto their brain and then their nervous system. I'm not safe. I actually have been abandoned because now I'm with somebody else that I don't know. So I don't want you to be like, oh my God, I had got a babysitter. We all did. This is life. But what I'm trying to do is give you an insight into what may have happened. And everybody's different how they're going to interpret any given situation, right? So how one person may interpret it is different than another. It may take something as simple as that for one child and something else completely different for another. But in that moment, whatever it is, whether it's my example or something else, the child makes a decision. Something's wrong. I'm being abandoned. I'm being passed over to someone else that I don't know. And so the world isn't safe. And in that moment, the nervous system, the brain and the nervous system starts to get information and to really imprint that information into the nervous system. So that's like the first time when I'm not safe in the world is going to show up. Something's wrong with me. And one step further is if I'm being handed over to someone I don't know, then the people that I was counting on, that I feel attached to, must not love me. Again, they don't have language. So it's not like they're saying that, babies are saying that in those words, but that's the feeling. That's the download into the nervous system. So if you think about how your childhood was, I'm going to share with you a little bit about my childhood because my mother had multiple sclerosis. She actually died when I was 4 years old. She had multiple sclerosis long before I was born. She was diagnosed. It was not a good diagnosis. I'm 58 years old. So this was, 54 years ago. And what was available for multiple sclerosis wasn't great. It's not what they have today. And, now she's having a baby and is being told this is not good for you. So when I was born, her health totally declined. So my caregivers changed a lot. I was with this babysitter and that babysitter and that babysitter. My mother wasn't able to care for me. That's called the mother wound. When you don't have the ability to bond with the mother, that's called the mother wound. So I didn't have that. And in addition to that, my dad was an alcoholic. And so there were times when we were going to babysitters and then he didn't come because I guess he'd been out drinking, is what I know now. But all I knew then when I was very little, 2 and 3, he didn't come. And so the decision about that is I'm not important enough because these very important people to me are not taking care of me. So I'm not important. So that's one example from my life. But just think about your life. Think about what was going on in the household, how many kids there were people working 2 jobs, what was the stress level? Because all it takes is a child to be, in a diaper and hungry for a long enough period of time to decide nobody's coming to help me. Maybe it's not that long. And we're doing the best we can, right? But that can happen. So that's where the initial hard wiring comes in. But it's not really hard wiring because hard wiring is truly in the design, right? Think of your computer. Your computer is hardwired to run certain programs. Our bodies and our nervous system are hardwired to take in information, interpret it, and use it, and also to be in touch with our intuition, to understand our guidance system. I did that this morning with my morning coffee conversation. And to work with our bodies, our physical bodies. That's the design. That's how God made the whole package, right? And there wasn't a flaw in the design that said I'm not important. There was not a flaw in the design that said I'm abandoned. So the hard wiring, even though it starts very early, the hard wiring, the true hard wiring, is clean. The true hard wiring knows the truth. I am important. I am loved. I'm not abandoned. Whether the people actually taking care of me or not are doing a great job, I'm not abandoned because I have that true source connection. So that's the true hard wiring. All right. That's why I say it's a yes and it's a no. So that kind of thinking starts the nervous system into stress and fight or flight very, very young. So a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old is having these experiences. Oh, and by the way, every time there's another example of something that feels similar, something that brings up the same emotions, something that, reminds us of that very first experience. Like, so now it's not I'm being handed over to babysitters, but maybe it's, I'm in my room asking for help in my homework and nobody's coming, or they're saying, figure it out yourself. I don't have time, or mommy just needs to handle this. Something that feels similar enough is going to then bring up that same nervous system response. And the brain goes, this feels familiar. This is the truth about life. See, here it is again. I'm not important. See, here it is again. I'm not being taken care of. And then we decide how we're going to cope with that. So we have to figure out our coping mechanisms, even as very, very, very young children. How am I going to cope with that? Maybe if I cry and ask for help, people say to me, I'll give you something to cry about. You better stop it. There's nothing wrong. Stop crying, or I'll give you something to cry about. So we stop crying, and we stop crying, and we stop crying. So now we're shoving emotions down, and we're learning the way to cope in this house, in this culture, in this world, whatever it is. The way to cope is, I better not cry. I better not show that I'm upset. So when that's been going on since the age of 2, 3, 4, by the time you get to high school, you're working really, really hard. A couple of things could happen, right? You could be working really, really hard to show how good you are, to make up for the fact that you're really not wanted in your nervous system, not consciously in your thoughts, but in your nervous system. That is the messaging. So you're working really, really hard to show that you're worthy. You're working really, really hard to try to feel lovable inside. By the time you're 30 and 40, that's been a lifetime of patterns. But you know what else happens? Not only is the nervous system triggered on like that, but now that coping mechanism is showing up in relationships. It's also showing up in the physical body. The physical body, there's a book, Bessel van der Kolk, which says the body always remembers. So, did I say that right? I think that's it. Yeah. The physical body will hold those memories of each of those experiences. So when people start to have chronic health issues, chronic pain, maybe it's the body never forgets. I feel like it's in the other room on my bookshelf, but I feel like I'm getting the title wrong. But you get the idea. The pain, chronic pain that we have, or health issues, digestive issues directly related to stress. Absolutely. I don't care whether you have SIBO, I don't care whether you have IBS, colitis, it doesn't matter. All of them have an underlying root cause of stress. So I got ulcerative colitis when I was 21 years old. And looking back now, so as I told you, my mom died when I was 4. My father was an alcoholic. He remarried. And there were a lot of issues related to that second marriage, related to the alcoholism, all of that. And I can remember being in 5th or 6th grade, started that about then, because I was still in my grammar school. And around 2:00 in the afternoon, I would start to get a stomach ache like, because I didn't want to go home at 3:30. I didn't want to go home. So I would start to feel that stomach ache. That contributes to digestion setting down, inflammation in the gut, that's stress. And then not only that, but as soon as I hit middle school, because I didn't want to go home, I joined everything you could join. I really did. I played a musical instrument. I was in 5 bands: jazz band, orchestra, wind ensemble, concert band, and marching band. I played 3 sports. Every season I played a sport. I was on this club. I made sure I could be at school as much as possible because I didn't want to go home. So that starts that workaholic, that numbing out, let me not be present in my life. Let me just keep myself really busy. It was a coping mechanism to not go home, but it became the only way I knew how to do life. So that's the hard wiring part. But again, that's not how we are. That's not the design. That's not how God designed us, to try to work so hard, to be a perfectionist, to prove we're lovable, to cope, to manage the fear of, life is scary, this isn't okay, to not deal with our emotions. We're here as human beings to deal with our emotions. That's why we're human, to have human emotions. And then we shove them down. So it's really like we have a virus that's been downloaded onto the computer. The computer is the hard drive, and the software that has a virus attached to it is the problem. So our design as a human being is the hard drive, and the decisions and the meanings and the imprinting on the nervous system is the virus of the software. So that's good news because viruses can be removed. People who know about computers, I don't, but people know how to like wipe the viruses. I remember, maybe I don't know if they still do this, but there used to be like your computer needs to be defragged. I think that meant fragments. So like defragging your computer. So people who are into computers know how to do that. You don't need to go get a new computer. You need to get the virus off. You don't need to be a different human being. You need to get that imprinting out of the nervous system. So it takes something. I'm not going to say it's necessarily an easy thing, like, oh, let's just go do that. It takes something because if you've been coping that way since 3 years old, if you've been thinking that way since a 10-month old, it's you got to unravel that. You've got to change how you think. You've got to learn how to move all those emotions that got shoved down, that somebody said, I'll give you something to cry about. So you stopped crying when you were 3 and when you were in first grade and when you were in 7th grade. You know, all those times they're shoved down in there. That has to be cleared out. You have to change how you think. You have to reset the nervous system. You have to teach the body how to feel safe again. People who have been stuck in fight or flight their whole lives, they don't know. I remember not knowing how to feel, like, what did safe really feel like? What does that even feel like? I'm just used to go, 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 go. I'm just used to, this is hard. This is how life is. I don't even know. What do you mean safe and relax? So you've got to teach the physical body. And the physical body is holding on to the messaging, the downloads that were incorrect. They were viruses, but the physical body holds on to them. So we have to release that. It's so wonderful. I do emotional clearing with my clients as part of when we do some really intensive work. And like I have a client who, and I don't know anything about them. I just, I'm doing the work that I do on clearing emotions. And there was an emotion of heartache. I think it was heartache, something like that, around the age of 1 for her. So when she was 1 year old, she's probably in her 40s now. When she was 1 year old, there was a stuck emotion of heartache for a 1 year old. So I didn't know anything about that, but I'm telling her these are the emotions that we've been clearing. And about a half hour later, she sent me a message and she said, I'm sitting here crying and crying, but it's tears of relief. Like I feel so light. I feel like a weight has been lifted off of me because we moved the energy of those stuck emotions out. And she said, when I was, I think, I don't know, 10 months old, a little bit before 1 year old, which was the information that I got, we're clearing this out. And this was from when you were a year old, whatever that means. She said when I was like a couple of months before my first birthday, her aunt was 38 years old. It was her mother's sister. Her aunt was murdered. So she didn't process consciously what that meant, but she knew in the household heartache. Her nervous system got that message. Her mother, that's a primal relationship, her and her mother. This is her mother's sister. So the mother, I'm sure, was distraught, right? So that translates back down to that child. And the stuck emotions of heartache have been in her since she was less than a year old. And when we moved that out, she was crying tears of relief. The following week, she's like, I'm sleeping better, all the stuff. So, moving the emotions out is great. That was amazing, right? But we also have to change how we think because there was also like anxiety and not trusting the world. Happened to be for the same person. She said, I just don't trust a lot. I'm always skeptical. I'm always guarded. It wasn't only from that one incident, but that one incident had a lot to do with it. It had a lot to do with it that imprinted on her nervous system. So we have to change how we think. We have to get those emotions out. We have to get the physical body in a different place where it's ready to release the guardedness that it has. And then there's the healing of that kind of wound. For a 10-month-old, to decide the world isn't safe. For a very young child to decide I'm not important enough, so I'm going to work really, really hard to try to show up as worthy, because somewhere in here, I know I'm not important enough. I'm not worthy. That was a decision that was made, you know, well under the age of 5, under the age of 3. So that wounding needs to be healed. That's in the spirit. So what we think, what we feel, the physical body, and the wounding in the spirit, that's spiritual healing. All of that is the process. So that's the long, complete answer. Yes, the nervous system does get imprinted with fear or unworthiness or trust issues, or the messaging that emotions are not to be shown, if or not to be expressed. All of that has the impact. And if you're having chronic health issues, if you have pain in your body, if you have digestive issues, if you have headaches, if you have autoimmune conditions, autoimmune directly related to this whole process, because the physical body is going to express what its experiences have been, what's stuck in there. It's not just about your genetics and you got a bad gene. It's not. So that's the complete answer. But no, we can clear that out. We can restore ourselves back to the original design of the product. God's original plan and design for us is restorable if you get the viruses off. So if you have any questions, please ask them somewhere. I'll go back either tonight or tomorrow and I'll look for them. And I hope that, as you kind of think about that and chew on that a bit, that puts some pieces together for your life. And if you really are like, wow, I can totally see, like, I got to tell you, as I started to look and see from this perspective, I thought, my God, I'm the poster child. I'm the poster child. And you'll know that, you'll feel that if this resonates as like, yeah, this is my issue. Because, ulcerative colitis at 21, other multiple autoimmune conditions, all of that, as life went on. And when I look back to my earliest foundational experiences, makes complete sense as to where we end up. Okay? So please ask any questions, and I will see you again this week to talk about something else. Have a great night.